The summer of 1885 brought scorching heat to the Kansas prairie, turning the grasslands golden and the riverbeds to cracked mud. But for Magnus Bull Thorson, the massive Norwegian rancher who ran the largest cattle operation in 3 counties, that brutal summer would bring something far more precious than rain, a chance to prove that even the most imposing man could possess the gentlest heart. Bull Thorson stood 6 feet 7 inches tall and weighed nearly 300 pounds of solid muscle earned from 20 years of hard ranch work. At 42, his massive frame, thick blonde beard going gray, and hands the size of dinner plates made children hide behind their mothers when he rode into town for supplies. People whispered that he was half bear, that he could break a man's back with one hand, that his temper was as big as his body. None of it was true. Bull was the gentlest soul who had ever walked the Kansas prairie, a man who rescued injured birds, spoke softly to frightened cattle, and had never raised his hand in violence against another human being in his entire life. But his enormous size made people see what they expected, rather than what was real. And Bull had long since accepted that he would spend his life alone, because no woman could see past his intimidating exterior to the kind heart beneath. His ranch, the Thunder Creek Spread, was a model of efficiency and humane animal husbandry. Bull treated his cattle and horses with respect, his ranch hands with fairness, and the land with reverence. He had built everything from nothing through hard work and careful planning, creating prosperity that should have brought him satisfaction. But prosperity without someone to share it with felt hollow, and Bull had resigned himself to a life of solitude punctuated only by the company of his animals and his small crew of ranch hands who had learned that their massive boss was more teddy bear than grizzly. That resignation shattered on a blazing afternoon in late July when Bull rode out to check on his southern fence line and discovered something that made his blood run cold. A young woman lying unconscious in the tall grass beside the river, her clothing torn, her skin burned by sun exposure, barely breathing in the deadly heat. Bull dismounted faster than a man his size should have been able to move, his massive hands surprisingly gentle as he checked for a pulse, and found it, weak and thready, but present. The girl couldn't be more than 18, with long dark hair matted with dried blood from a head wound, her simple dress suggesting she was from a poor family, her bare feet cut and blistered from walking long distances without shoes. Someone had hurt her badly and left her to die in the merciless summer heat, and rage filled Bull's chest at the cruelty humans could inflict on the innocent and vulnerable. But rage wouldn't save her life. Action would. Bull carefully lifted the unconscious girl, cradling her fragile body against his massive chest with the same gentleness he used handling newborn calves, and rode hard for his ranch house 3 miles away. "Don't you die on me, little one," he murmured as he rode, one arm supporting her while the other controlled his horse. "Whatever happened to you, you're safe now. Bull's got you, and I promise nobody's going to hurt you ever again." And that's when Bull realized this wasn't just about saving a life. This was about proving that size and strength mattered less than compassion and care, just like you're about to discover that hitting that subscribe button means you'll see how this gentle giant transforms this broken girl's entire world, because what happens next will restore your faith in human kindness. Bull's ranch house was built to accommodate his massive frame, with reinforced furniture, extra-wide doorways, and a custom bed that could support his considerable weight. He carried the unconscious girl to his guest room, a space he'd built hoping someday he might have family visit, though that hope had faded over the years, and began the careful work of saving her life. First priority was bringing down her dangerously high body temperature. Bull had learned frontier medicine from necessity, having treated countless ranch hands and animals over the years. He knew that heat stroke could kill as surely as any bullet, and this girl was perilously close to the point of no return. He filled his largest wash basin with cool water from the well, soaked cloths, and placed them on her forehead, wrists, and ankles, where blood vessels ran close to the surface. He carefully spooned water between her cracked lips, tilting her head to prevent choking. He opened all the windows to create cross-ventilation and set buckets of cool water around the room to lower the air temperature. All of this he did with methodical efficiency, his massive hands performing delicate tasks with surprising precision. When he needed to remove her torn and filthy dress to better treat her injuries, he did so with clinical respect, replacing it immediately with one of his own shirts that hung on her small frame like a tent, preserving her modesty while allowing her skin to breathe. The head wound worried him most, a nasty gash along her hairline that had bled considerably, but thankfully didn't seem deep enough to have caused skull damage. Bull cleaned it carefully with whiskey, applied a poultice made from herbs his Norwegian grandmother had taught him about, and bandaged it with strips of clean linen. Her feet were another concern, cut and blistered from walking barefoot across rough terrain in summer heat. Bull treated each injury with gentle thoroughness, applying salve and wrapping them in soft bandages, wondering what desperation had driven this young woman to walk until her feet were raw. For 3 days, Bull maintained his vigil, sleeping in a chair beside her bed, waking every few hours to check her temperature and encourage more water into her system. His ranch hands handled the daily operations without complaint, having long since learned that their boss's compassion extended to any creature in need. On the morning of the 4th day, the girl's eyes finally opened, brown as prairie soil after rain, filled with confusion and fear that intensified when she saw Bull's massive frame looming beside her bed. "Please don't hurt me," she whispered, her voice raw from disuse, pressing herself against the headboard despite obvious weakness. "I'll do whatever you want. Just please don't hurt me anymore." Bull's heart broke at the terror in her voice, at the assumption that his size meant violence. He immediately backed away, making himself as small and non-threatening as his enormous body would allow, lowering his voice to the gentle rumble he used with frightened horses. "Easy now, little one. You're safe here. I'm not going to hurt you. I found you dying by the river and brought you here to heal. My name is Magnus Thorson, but folks call me Bull. What's your name? But you haven't seen the most important part yet." The girl stared at him with wide, frightened eyes, clearly torn between her fear of his size and the evidence that he had been caring for her with obvious gentleness. After a long moment, she spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. Emma Walsh. Where am I?" "You're at Thunder Creek Ranch, about 20 miles west of Dodge City," Bull explained, staying carefully across the room to avoid frightening her further. "I found you unconscious 3 days ago. You'd been out in the heat too long, and someone had hurt you pretty badly. Do you remember what happened?" Emma's hand moved instinctively to the bandage on her head, and Bull saw memory flood back into her eyes, memory that brought tears and trembling. "My stepfather," she whispered. "He said I was old enough to earn my keep. He wanted to." She couldn't finish the sentence, but Bull understood with sickening clarity. Her stepfather had attempted to assault her, and Emma had fought back and run. The head wound suggested he'd struck her during the struggle, and she'd fled into the brutal summer heat rather than submit to violence. "He's not going to touch you again," Bull said with quiet conviction. "You're under my protection now, and anyone who wants to hurt you will have to go through me first. And I promise you, Emma, I would never lay a harmful hand on you or any woman. You're safe here for as long as you need to stay." Emma studied his face, seeing something in his eyes that made her relax slightly. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Bull's smile was gentle despite his intimidating appearance. "Because helping people who need it is what decent folks do. And because I know what it's like to be judged by your appearance instead of your character. People look at me and see a monster, but you're going to learn that the biggest bodies can hold the kindest hearts." Over the following weeks, Emma's physical wounds healed under Bull's patient care, but more importantly, she began to heal from the deeper wounds of betrayal and violence. Bull treated her with unwavering respect, never entering her room without knocking, never touching her without permission, never raising his voice or moving suddenly in ways that might frighten someone who had learned to associate large men with danger. He taught her how to help around the ranch, easy tasks at first like gathering eggs and feeding chickens, gradually building to more complex work as her strength returned. Emma discovered that she loved working with the animals, especially the horses that responded to her gentle voice and patient handling. "You have a gift with them," Bull observed one morning, watching Emma successfully calm a skittish mare that had been abused by previous owners. "They know you understand fear because you've felt it yourself." Emma looked up at him with newfound confidence. "You taught me that. The way you handle them, firm but never cruel, patient but never weak. I never knew strength could be gentle until I met you." Wait, don't miss what happens next. As summer turned to autumn, the relationship between Bull and Emma evolved from caretaker and patient into something deeper and more complex. Emma began to see past Bull's intimidating exterior to the man beneath, someone whose size made him seem dangerous, but whose every action demonstrated extraordinary gentleness and care. She noticed how carefully he moved through the world, always aware of his strength and consciously choosing to use it for protection rather than domination. She saw how his ranch hands respected rather than feared him, how his animals trusted him completely, how children who initially hid from him eventually climbed on his broad shoulders and pulled his beard with delighted giggles once they learned he was safe. Most importantly, Emma recognized that Bull's loneliness ran as deep as her own trauma. He had spent decades being judged by his appearance, building a successful ranch, but missing the family that would make success meaningful. His massive house felt empty despite its size, filled with furniture built for one person and silence broken only by his own footsteps. "Why did you never marry?" Emma asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching sunset paint the prairie in impossible colors. Bull was quiet for a long moment, his weathered face thoughtful. "Because no woman could see past my size to the person underneath. They looked at these hands and imagined violence instead of gentleness. They saw my height and imagined danger instead of protection. After a while, I stopped trying to convince them otherwise and accepted that some people are meant to walk through life alone." Emma felt tears prick her eyes at the loneliness in his voice. "I see you, Bull. I see your gentleness and your kindness. I see how you handle injured birds with the same care you showed me. I see a man whose size could intimidate armies, but who chooses to use his strength to protect the weak instead of dominate them." She reached out and placed her small hand on his massive one, feeling the calluses from years of hard work, the scars from countless small injuries, the warmth of someone whose heart was as big as his body. "You saved my life twice, once from heat stroke and once from believing all men were monsters. I don't see a giant when I look at you. I see the kindest soul I've ever known." Bull stared at her hand on his, afraid to hope that what he was feeling might be reciprocated. "Emma, you're young enough to be my daughter. You've been through terrible trauma. I don't want you to mistake gratitude for something else." "I'm 18 years old, Bull Thorson, old enough to know the difference between gratitude and love," Emma said firmly. "And I love you. I love your gentleness and your patience. I love how you made me feel safe when I'd forgotten what safety felt like. I love that you see me as a person worth protecting instead of property to be used. What you're seeing now is nothing compared to what comes next." Bull's response was careful, wanting to honor Emma's feelings while being honest about his own fears. "Emma, I love you too. I've loved you since the day I found you, and you trusted me enough to let me help you heal. But loving you means wanting what's best for you, and I'm not sure that's me. You could have any young man you want, someone closer to your age, someone who doesn't frighten people just by walking into a room." Emma stood up, moving to stand directly in front of Bull's chair, forcing him to meet her eyes. "I don't want someone my age who might grow cruel as he gains power. I don't want someone who looks harmless but hides violence inside. I want you, a man whose size advertises his strength but whose character proves that strength and gentleness aren't opposites." She took his massive face in her small hands, standing on tiptoe to meet his eyes directly. "Bull, you saved my life when I was helpless. You treated me with respect when I was vulnerable. You never once tried to take advantage of my dependence on you. If that's not love worth having, I don't know what is." Bull felt his carefully maintained emotional control crumble as he pulled Emma gently into his arms, holding her with the same careful strength he used for all precious things. "I promise, I'll spend every day proving you made the right choice. I'll protect you, cherish you, and never give you reason to fear my strength." Their first kiss was tender and patient, Bull letting Emma set the pace and depth, aware that her past trauma required infinite gentleness. When they finally pulled apart, Emma was smiling with a joy Bull had never thought he'd be blessed to see. "I'm not afraid of you, Bull. I never really was. I was afraid of what men could do with their strength until you showed me what they should do with it instead." The proposal came naturally a month later, during the first snow of winter when the prairie transformed into a wonderland of white. Bull had been building Emma a hope chest, a massive piece of furniture that could withstand his strength, but was carved with delicate flowers that showed his artistic soul. When he presented it to her, filled with quilts and linens he'd commissioned from the town's best seamstress, Emma understood what he was asking. "This is beautiful, Bull, but I don't need a hope chest." Bull's face fell slightly. "You don't want to marry me?" Emma laughed, throwing her arms around his massive neck. "I don't need a hope chest because I'm not hoping anymore. I'm certain. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll spend my life with you. Yes, I want to build a family with you and prove that love has nothing to do with matching sizes and everything to do with matching souls." The wedding took place in Bull's ranch house on a winter morning when snow fell soft as blessing. The ranch hands served as witnesses while a traveling preacher performed the ceremony, occasionally distracted by the sight of the massive groom and his tiny bride standing together, a visual representation of how love bridges all differences. When the preacher asked if Bull would take Emma as his wife, to love and protect her all his days, Bull's answer rang through the house with absolute conviction. "I will love her, protect her, cherish her, and spend every day grateful that God sent her to my ranch. I promise to use my strength to shelter her dreams and my gentleness to heal her wounds. I will be the man she sees when she looks at me, not the monster others imagine." Emma's vows were equally powerful, spoken in a strong voice that showed how far she'd come from the terrified girl Bull had found dying in the grass. "I promise to see you as you truly are, the gentlest soul wrapped in the most imposing package. I promise to remind you daily that you are worthy of love. I promise to build a life with you where our children grow up understanding that true strength is always gentle and that the biggest hearts come in the biggest bodies." Years passed, and Thunder Creek Ranch became known throughout Kansas, not just for its successful cattle operation, but as a place where people who had been hurt or abandoned could find sanctuary. Bull and Emma took in troubled children, employed drifters who needed second chances, and created a community built on the radical premise that everyone deserved to be valued for their character rather than judged by their appearance. Emma bore Bull 5 children, 3 boys who inherited their father's size, and 2 girls who took after their mother's delicate frame. All of them grew up understanding that strength without kindness was just bullying. That size, without gentleness, was just intimidation, and that the most powerful force in the world was love that chose to protect rather than dominate. Bull's gentleness with his tiny newborns became legendary throughout the territory. The sight of his massive hands cradling infants who looked impossibly fragile in his arms, singing Norwegian lullabies in his deep rumbling voice, tears streaming down his weathered face as he marveled that anything so small could be so perfect. On their 25th anniversary, as they sat on the porch watching their grandchildren play in the yard, Emma reflected on the day Bull had found her dying in the grass. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if someone else had found me first?" Bull pulled her close, this tiny woman who had transformed his entire world. "I try not to think about it. God knew what we both needed. You needed someone strong enough to protect you, but gentle enough to heal you. And I needed someone brave enough to see past my size, to my soul. Best day of my life was the day I woke up and saw you sitting beside my bed," Emma said, kissing him despite the grandchildren giggling at their display of affection. Second best day was when you asked me to marry you. Third best? Bull asked with a smile. Every day since then, Emma replied. Every single day I've gotten to spend with the gentlest giant who ever walked the earth. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that true strength is always gentle, and that the biggest hearts often come in the most imposing packages, then you've found your home. Subscribe to Wild West Romance Stories for more tales of healing, hope, and love that sees past appearances to the soul beneath. From prairie grasslands to family homesteads, every story we tell proves that the most powerful force in the world is love that chooses to protect the vulnerable rather than dominate them. This is where broken souls find healing, where gentle giants find love, and where everyone learns that character matters infinitely more than appearance.